It doesn't turn right because you're fighting the wind, not dancing with it. The words slipped out of Emily Carter's mouth so softly that, at first, she thought no one had heard. But old Mr. Dobbs, standing beside her at the fence line, stopped tightening the rusted wire and looked at her as if she'd just said something that made the earth tilt a fraction. It was late July in the Texas Panhandle, and the air shimmered like a mirage. Heat pressed down from the endless dome of sky. Yet the wind, the famous, tireless wind of the high plains, was alive, wild, and unrelenting. It hissed through the brittle stalks of dried blue stem, rattled the sheet metal roof of the calf barn, and whistled through the crooked teeth of the old windmill tower on the Dobbs property. Emily balanced on the lower rail of the fence, her boots scuffed and dust-caked, a bent square of corrugated cardboard under one arm. She'd pulled it earlier from a feed sack box, its edges already curling. Her father called it junk. Emily called it her notebook. "Dancing with it?" Dobbs chuckled, shaking his head. "Little girl, that thing's been standing here 30 years. It don't dance. It creaks." Emily didn't answer. She crouched down, cardboard against her knee, and with a stub of a pencil began sketching a curved line. The line bent and tapered, and she drew 3 short arrows to mark the direction of wind. Her hand moved without hesitation. She had drawn this shape 100 times before. From the side, the drawing resembled a bird's wing caught mid-dip. But in Emily's mind, it was something else entirely. The invisible arc the wind traced when it met a blade, the way it slipped or stalled depending on its approach. The Carter family's ranch sat about 20 miles north of Dumas, where the land was as flat as a page on a drafting table. Wheat fields and grazing pastures rolled into one another until they reached the faint blue blur of horizon. There were no trees tall enough to block the wind, no hills to slow it. The wind had no patience here. It arrived and departed as it pleased, carrying with it dust, seeds, and the occasional tumbleweed skeleton. Emily's father, Jack Carter, worked 12-hour days running cattle and tending the barley plots that clung stubbornly to the sandy soil. Her mother, Ruth, kept the household together, though the money from the last harvest had barely covered the loan payment on the tractor. The year before, a hailstorm had flattened half their crop in an afternoon. The year before that, a well pump had failed. There was always something. The Carters weren't the poorest family in Moore County, but they were closer to the edge than anyone liked to admit. Every piece of machinery was patched with baling wire and prayers. Every decision came down to the same question: can we afford it? Emily, their only child, had grown up in this economy of scarcity. She had no computer of her own, no phone, no shiny toys. What she had were the wind, her father's toolbox, and the cardboard boxes that feed supplements came in. She scavenged them from the shed, flattened them on the barn floor, and filled their surfaces with drawings. Some copied from old science books at the public library, others sprung from quiet observation. That afternoon, helping Mr. Dobbs fix his fence, Emily had noticed the windmill head turning awkwardly, almost resisting the gusts that drove it. The vanes were weathered, the tail fin warped. She knew, just by the way its shadow stuttered across the grass, that something about the angle was wrong. "It's pushing against it instead of letting it through," she said, more to herself than to Dobbs. Dobbs raised an eyebrow. "How you figure?" Emily held up her cardboard, the pencil lines catching the late sun. "See here? If the wind comes like this," she tapped the long arrow, "and your blades are like this," she drew a quick sketch of a circle with lines at a flat angle, "then it catches too much at the wrong part, slows it down. But if you turn it a little, just enough so the wind has to slide over it." She rotated the cardboard slightly in her hands, letting the real wind push against its surface. The board trembled, then steadied, humming faintly. "Then it dances." Dobbs scratched the back of his neck. Huh. Never thought of it that way. Later that evening, after supper, Emily sat on the porch steps with her cardboard and sketched again. She wasn't copying from a book, though she had once seen something like this in an old library volume about airplanes. This was her own map of the wind. On one panel, she drew the same blade profile 3 times, each at a different angle. Beside each, she marked the strength of push she imagined it would feel. Not numbers, just tiny swirls, more for herself than anyone else. On another panel, she began charting how the wind shifted over the course of the day. A lazy southwest drift in the morning, a sharper, more restless force from the north by evening. From inside the house came the sound of her mother rinsing dishes and her father's boots clunking against the wall as he pulled them off. A weather radio crackled on the counter, announcing more heat for tomorrow and a breezy forecast, a polite understatement for the constant buffet of the panhandle. Emily didn't mind the wind. She liked the way it carried scents from miles away. Alfalfa, diesel, rain that might never arrive. She liked the way it made her hair whip across her face when she ran through the pasture. Most of all, she liked the way it behaved differently depending on what it touched. The next morning, she woke before sunrise to help her father mend another section of fence. The air was cooler, the wind a gentle whisper. Jack handed her the pliers without a word, and together they worked in the quiet rhythm of early chores. "Mr. Dobbs says you told him how to fix his windmill," Jack said after a while, not looking at her. "I didn't fix it. Just told him why it wasn't turning right." Jack snorted. "You and that cardboard. One of these days you're going to run out of boxes." She smiled faintly. "There's always more feed." When they finished, she climbed onto the bed of the pickup and watched the first light spill over the fields. Somewhere far off, she could see the slow, dignified spin of the big wind turbines, white giants that had appeared over the past few years, their blades glinting like knives in the sun. She'd studied those turbines every chance she got. Even from miles away, she noticed when one turned faster than its neighbors, or when a blade's motion seemed strained. She wondered what it would be like to stand at the base of one, to hear the low thrum as the wind turned steel into power. That afternoon, after her chores, she sat in the barn with her largest piece of cardboard yet, a section nearly the size of a kitchen table. She sketched the outline of a turbine blade, long and narrow, with a subtle twist along its length. She remembered reading once about angle of attack, the way an airplane wing cuts through air to create lift. She didn't know the math behind it, no sine, no cosine, no drag coefficients, but she knew how it looked, how it felt. She drew a line representing the wind's path, then adjusted the blade so that the line met it at just the right slant. Not too steep, not too shallow, enough to coax the wind into pushing and slipping at the same time. The barn door creaked open. "Emily? You in here?" It was Mrs. Harper from down the road, here to drop off eggs in trade for some hay. She stepped inside, blinking in the dim light. Her gaze fell on the sprawling cardboard. "My, what's this?" "Just an idea," Emily said, suddenly shy. Mrs. Harper leaned closer. "Looks like something they'd have at that wind farm out east." Emily shrugged. "I guess." What she didn't say was that she'd been thinking about those turbines for weeks, about why some seemed to waste the wind, why some sang in the gusts while others just groaned, and she didn't say that she'd begun to suspect there was a way to make them better, a way that no one else around here seemed to notice. That night, the wind shifted, as it always did. The moon hung low and orange, and the barley rustled in restless waves. From her bedroom window, Emily could see the old Dobbs windmill turning more easily now, the blades catching the breeze without complaint. She smiled, then rolled over and reached for the square of cardboard leaning against her nightstand. There were still blank corners to fill, new curves to draw, new arrows to trace. The wind had more to teach her, and she would keep listening. Because here, on the high plains, the wind never stopped speaking. And Emily Carter had learned that if you stopped fighting it and started listening, really listening, it might just tell you where to turn. The wind was angrier that day. By noon, the Texas sun had burned the last of the morning's coolness out of the air, and the sky was a brittle blue, the kind that makes shadows razor sharp. The wind came in from the west, hard enough to bend the taller grasses sideways and slap grit into the eyes of anyone foolish enough to look straight into it. Emily Carter didn't mind. She had learned to squint just so, letting her lashes filter the dust. She carried a folded piece of feed box cardboard under her arm, the pencil tucked behind her ear. She was walking the long mile to the Dobbs place, though she wasn't going for Mr. Dobbs this time. She'd heard the squeal of his old windmill from her porch, an ugly grating note that meant the bearings were dry again. But when she crested the last rise before his property, what caught her eye wasn't the Dobbs windmill at all. It was the water-pumping windmill behind the Johnson Ranch house, a weathered relic from the 1940s, its vanes shuddering as if trying to flee the tower. The wind was hitting it wrong. It was leaning just a touch, as though it were flinching from each gust. She slowed, watching the blades struggle. "Something wrong with that one," said a voice behind her. She turned to see young Nathan Johnson, barely 17, tall and sunburnt, standing by a fence post with a coil of wire slung over one shoulder. He nodded toward the windmill. "It's pumping less water this week," he said. "Dad says we'll have to fix it after the weekend." Emily shaded her eyes. "You could fix it now. You just have to change the angle." Nathan laughed, not unkindly. "Change the angle? It's been standing like that my whole life." "That's why it's wrong," she said simply. Before he could reply, a fresh gust shoved at the tower, making the whole structure tremble. Emily knelt right there in the dirt, pulled her pencil free, and unfolded the cardboard. She began to draw. First, the circle of the windmill head, then a side profile of one blade, then a sweeping curve to show the path of the wind. The pencil whispered against the cardboard, the lines quick and sure. She added arrows, one set for the wind's arrival, another for its exit after hitting the blade. Finally, she drew two versions side by side, one with the current angle, the other with her suggested change. "You see here?" she said, tapping the first sketch. "The wind hits it flat, right here." She pointed to the leading edge. "That slows it down, makes it fight. But if you turn it like this..." She indicated the second drawing, where the blade caught the wind at a gentler slope. "It slides past, like when you open your hand in a creek instead of holding it flat against the water." Nathan crouched beside her, his eyes narrowing. "Where'd you learn that?" Emily shrugged. "Watching the wind?" It was then that the noise reached them, low at first, like a distant truck, then growing louder. They both turned to see a white van bouncing along the dirt road toward the Johnson property. Blue letters on the side read, "Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Renewable Energy Research Group." The van rolled to a stop near the windmill, and the side door slid open. 3 people climbed out, 2 men in ball caps and sunglasses, and a woman in a wide-brimmed hat holding a clipboard. All 3 were looking up at the old windmill with professional interest. "Excuse me," the woman called to Nathan. "Do you live here?" "My folks do," Nathan said cautiously. "We're surveying wind activity in the Panhandle," she explained, walking closer. "Your windmill caught our attention because it's misaligned." Emily felt a flicker of pride. "I knew it," she thought. The taller of the 2 men, who had a camera slung around his neck, noticed the cardboard in Emily's hands. "What's that?" She hesitated. "Just a drawing." "May I see it?" Emily glanced at Nathan, who gave a little shrug. She handed the cardboard over. The man studied it for a long moment, then showed it to the woman with the hat. "Look at this," he said. "She's drawn the airflow across the blade and even indicated an optimal angle adjustment." The woman's brows lifted. "You did this?" Emily nodded, unsure what to say. 5 minutes later, she found herself standing in a small semicircle with the 3 visitors, the windmill creaking behind them. The woman introduced herself as Dr. Clara Harper, head of the MIT field team. "We're studying micro-adjustments to turbine blade angles," Harper said, crouching to Emily's height. "It's a complex problem, requires balancing torque, tip-speed ratio, and aerodynamic efficiency. And here you've drawn a version of exactly what we've been modeling for months." Emily frowned slightly. "It's just, you don't hold the wind still. You have to let it go where it wants, but help it push you along the way." The man with the camera grinned. "That's actually a great description of variable pitch control." Emily didn't know what that meant, but she tucked the phrase away for later. Harper turned the cardboard over in her hands. "Would you mind if we took a photo of this? Strictly for our notes." Emily hesitated only a moment before nodding. The man raised his camera, snapped 2 shots, and handed the cardboard back carefully, as if it were glass. For the rest of that afternoon, the MIT team set up small anemometers and data loggers around the Johnson windmill, measuring wind speed, direction, and blade rotation rate. Emily lingered nearby, answering their occasional questions with the same plain-spoken directness she always used. She didn't know about Reynolds numbers or boundary layer separation, but she could tell them that the wind here was lazier before noon and more impatient after 2, and that it slid differently over barley than over dry grass. Dr. Harper listened closely, jotting notes that made no sense to Emily. But once, Emily caught the older woman looking at her the way Mr. Dobbs had the day before, like she'd said something worth remembering. By the time the MIT van pulled away in the golden light of evening, Emily's cardboard was tucked under her arm again, the pencil lines smudged from so many hands touching them. At supper, she told her parents what had happened. "They were from where?" her father asked. Fork paused over his plate. "MIT," Emily repeated carefully. "Massachusetts Institute of Technology." Her mother gave a soft laugh. "That's a long way from here." "They took pictures of your drawing?" her father asked. Emily nodded. Jack Carter looked at his wife, then back at his daughter. "Well, maybe they saw something worth looking at." Emily didn't say anything. She didn't want to hope too much. Out here, you learned that interesting visitors came and went, and the wind kept blowing the same as always. But she did keep the cardboard by her bed that night, just in case. 3 days passed before Emily saw the white MIT van again. It arrived in the early afternoon, kicking up a plume of pale dust along the ranch road. The sound of its tires crunching over gravel reached Emily before she saw it. She was in the barn, repairing a cracked bucket with baling wire. An unnecessary repair, really, but one she'd decided to do anyway. Her father's voice called from outside. "Emily, you've got visitors!" She stepped into the sun, wiping her hands on the back of her jeans. Dr. Clara Harper climbed out of the van first, followed by the tall man with the camera and a third person Emily hadn't met before, a thin, quiet fellow carrying a case that looked like it belonged to a musician. "Good to see you again," Harper said warmly. "We were hoping you could spare us a few minutes." Emily nodded. "Sure." The thin man set the case down and flipped it open. Inside was not an instrument, but a model turbine, 3 delicate blades attached to a motor the size of a coffee mug. The blades were adjustable. A set of protractors and small dials allowed them to be pitched at precise angles. "We've been testing your drawing," Harper said, kneeling to place the model on a folding stand. "We set it up in our lab trailer and compared your suggested blade angle to our current experimental setting." Emily felt her heart knock against her ribs. And? Harper smiled. And your angle outperformed ours by a measurable margin. About 8% more output in a steady wind of 15 miles per hour. The tall man added, "That's not small. For a utility-scale turbine, 8% could power hundreds more homes." Emily bent toward the model, studying the small blades as they spun gently in the afternoon breeze. She could see what they'd done. Each blade was twisted slightly, so its leading edge bit into the wind, but its trailing edge gave it a way out. "It's not magic," she said quietly. "The wind just doesn't like to be trapped." Harper straightened, brushing dust from her knees. "I have a question for you, Emily. Would you like to try something more challenging?" Emily hesitated. "What do you mean?" From the pocket of her vest, Harper pulled out a folded sheet of paper. She smoothed it against the hood of the van and handed it over. On the page was a diagram, 3 circles representing turbine rotors, connected by lines that looked like contour maps. Arrows showed wind flow between them. There were numbers in neat black ink, angles, distances, wind speeds, and a single question at the bottom. Determine the optimal blade pitch angle and yaw orientation for maximum combined output under variable wind direction. Emily stared at it. She didn't know what yaw orientation meant. She didn't know the equations she was supposed to use. But she recognized the problem immediately. 3 turbines in a row, stealing each other's wind. "This is real?" she asked. "Very real," Harper said. "It's something our graduate team has been stuck on for months. We can model it in computers, but real-world wind is messy." Emily crouched right there in the dirt and set the paper beside her. She took the piece of cardboard she'd been carrying all morning, an empty mineral block box, now flattened, and began to sketch. First, she drew the 3 turbines as circles. Then she shaded the wake, the turbulence behind each one, like ripples in water. She adjusted their positions slightly in her drawing, rotating the second turbine just enough to catch part of the wind that slipped past the first. She did the same with the third, but angled its blades in the opposite direction to capture the crosswind. Her pencil moved fast, the shapes growing more certain with each line. She added arrows for wind direction at different times of day, remembering how the gusts felt when she walked between the Dobbs pasture and the Johnson fence. She could almost smell the dry grass as she drew the evening wind sliding in from the north-northwest. When she finished, she pushed the cardboard toward Harper. The 3 visitors crouched over it. The tall man murmured something under his breath. The quiet one with the model turbine traced the arrows with his finger. "You've adjusted the yaw on the downwind turbines so they're intentionally skewed into the side gust," Harper said slowly. "That's not in our current model." "It's just like herding cattle," Emily said. "If you push them all straight ahead, the ones at the back get crowded and slow down. But if you let the back ones move at a little angle, they can find space and keep going." The quiet man chuckled. "I never thought I'd hear turbulence explained with cows. But she's not wrong." Harper straightened, tucking the cardboard under her arm. "Emily, this is very good. Very, very good." For a moment, no one spoke. The wind rattled the loose sheet metal on the barn roof. Emily's father came around from the far side of the truck, wiping grease from his hands. "They giving you homework?" he asked, half smiling. "Sort of," Emily said. Harper approached Jack Carter. "Sir, I hope you don't mind my saying so, but your daughter has a remarkable intuitive grasp of aerodynamics. The way she visualizes airflow, it's rare, even among our graduate students." Jack glanced at Emily, then back at Harper. "She just watches a lot. Always has." "Sometimes that's the best training," Harper said gently. Before they left, Harper gave Emily the sheet of paper with the original turbine problem. "Keep this," she said, "and if you think of any other ideas, write them down. We might want to test them." Emily tucked it carefully into her back pocket. She didn't know what would come of it, but the thought of people at a place called the Massachusetts Institute of Technology looking at her cardboard sketches made her feel something she couldn't name, something bigger than pride. That night, lying in bed, she took the paper out again. The numbers meant little to her, but the arrows and circles made perfect sense. She reached for her pencil and began a second drawing on the back, this time imagining what the turbines would do if the wind shifted from the east instead. By the time she fell asleep, the paper was covered in new lines. Outside, the panhandle wind moved restlessly across the fields, as if it knew it had been given a new puzzle to solve. The morning they came to test her idea, the wind was already awake. It wasn't the harsh, sand-laced gusts that sometimes roared in from the west. Today's wind was steady, a long exhale rolling over the barley fields, the kind of wind that made the big blades on the far-off wind farm turn in perfect rhythm, like giant clock hands keeping time with the plains. Emily had been up since before sunrise, too restless to sleep. She'd brushed down the horses, stacked the feed buckets, and then sat on the fence with her cardboard in her lap, waiting for the white MIT van. When it finally arrived, she jumped down before the tires had even stopped crunching on gravel. Dr. Harper climbed out, followed by the tall man with the camera, whose name Emily had learned was Mark, and the quiet engineer, Dr. Singh, who carried the same model turbine case as before. But this time, there was another piece of equipment, a tall, skinny tripod with cups on top that looked like a child's pinwheel. "Anemometer?" Singh explained when he caught Emily looking at it. "It measures wind speed and direction." "I can tell you that without it," Emily said, pointing toward the southwest. 14, maybe 15 miles an hour right now." Singh smiled faintly, but didn't comment. He set the anemometer in the middle of the Carter pasture, its cups already spinning. They unloaded the model turbine, set it on a small platform, and began adjusting the blade pitch according to Emily's cardboard sketches. Singh worked carefully, tightening each blade at a slight skew. Harper explained that in a real turbine, the pitch could be adjusted automatically with sensors and motors, but for now, they would test her angle manually. Mark set up a laptop connected to the turbine's small generator. "We'll measure output in watts. It won't be much at this scale, but the difference in percentage is what we're looking for." Emily stood close, watching every movement. The blades began to turn slowly at first, then faster, catching the wind in that just right balance between push and release. The laptop screen showed a small number climbing steadily. "Baseline test," Singh said, setting the blades back to the team's original angle. The number dropped by several points. "Now, Emily's configuration again." They reset the blades to her angle. The number jumped. Singh read it aloud. 18% increase over baseline. Emily's father, standing with his arms crossed nearby, gave a low whistle. "That's more than just a fluke." But Harper wasn't satisfied with a single trial. She wanted to test the design in changing conditions, the way the wind shifted through a normal panhandle day. For the next few hours, they rotated the model platform to mimic wind direction changes. Emily advised them when to tweak the yaw, how to turn the whole rotor slightly so it caught not just the headwind, but a hint of side breeze. She explained it in plain language. "If the wind's coming mostly south but a little west, don't face straight south. You'll miss the helping push from the west. You point a bit toward where it's actually coming from, even if it's not the main flow." Singh noted every adjustment, marking angles in degrees, wind speed from the anemometer, and output from the generator. By midday, the wind had picked up to nearly 20 miles an hour. The little model blades whirred so fast Emily could hear their faint hum even over the rustle of the barley. Harper called for one last round of measurements before packing up. The final average improvement? 18.3%. Almost exactly the same as Emily had predicted. They gathered under the thin shade of the barn roof, drinking water from mason jars while Singh and Harper reviewed the data. "This is unusual," Singh said at last, glancing at Emily. "You've essentially optimized our test turbine without access to any computational fluid dynamics models or prior technical training." Emily shifted in her seat. "I just watch how the wind moves." Harper looked at her father. "Jack, would you let Emily visit our field lab in Amarillo next week? We'd like to try her configuration on a larger prototype." Jack frowned slightly. "That's over an hour's drive. We've got chores." "We'd cover transportation and meals," Harper said quickly. "And it would only be for the day. She'd be back before dark." Emily held her breath. Jack looked at his daughter, sweaty, dust-streaked, but with eyes so bright it was like the wind itself was inside them. "All right," he said finally. "One day." That evening, long after the van had gone and the sun was sinking into a band of copper light, Emily sat on the porch with her mother. The air was calmer now, the barley swaying like a slow tide. "You think they really need me up there?" she asked. Her mother smiled, smoothing a strand of hair from her face. "I think they've been working a long time on something you saw in an afternoon. But I don't know the numbers, or the words they use." "You know the wind," her mother said simply. "That might be enough." The next week, she would see machines taller than any barn, hear the deep roar of wind turning steel into power, and watch her cardboard-born idea prove itself on a scale she could barely imagine. But for now, she closed her eyes and listened to the wind in the grass, the same way she had since she was small. It didn't sound any different than it had yesterday. But somehow it felt like it knew her name. The first sign of trouble didn't come from Texas. It came from a conference room 2,000 miles away. Emily didn't know this at first. She only knew that Dr. Harper's promised visit to the Amarillo field lab kept being delayed. First because of equipment calibration, then because the board needs to review our next steps. She didn't know that, in Cambridge, Massachusetts, a group of senior engineers and professors had been handed Harper's report, the one showing an 18% gain on turbine efficiency, and had reacted not with excitement, but with suspicion. When the call finally came, it wasn't from Harper. It was Mark, the tall man with the camera. His voice crackled slightly over the Carter family's landline. "They've read the report," he said without preamble. "And? They don't believe it." Emily glanced at her father, who was sitting at the kitchen table repairing a pair of gloves. "What do you mean they don't believe it?" "They think the improvement might be an anomaly, or that Harper's team introduced a variable we didn't account for, and some..." He hesitated. "Some are saying there's no way a 12-year-old with no formal training could produce a design like this." Jack Carter's jaw tightened. "They think she copied it?" "Some do. Others think Harper exaggerated. Either way, they've asked for proof they can see in real time." 2 days later, Harper herself called. Her tone was warm, but there was a weariness underneath. "Emily, the board wants to see you work. Not just the results, your process." "They want to watch me draw?" "Yes," Harper said simply. "They'll give you a problem. Live. No one else in the room can help. If you can walk them through it, show your reasoning, they'll have no choice but to accept your work as original." "When?" "This Friday." Friday came, and Emily found herself sitting in front of the family's old desktop computer, the webcam balanced on top of a stack of farm ledgers to get the right angle. Harper had arranged a video conference with the MIT board. On the screen, a grid of faces appeared, some curious, some skeptical, a few openly disinterested. "Emily," Harper said from her square in the corner, "thank you for joining us. The panel will present you with a wind engineering problem, and you may respond in whatever medium you prefer. A man with a neat gray beard spoke first. Here is the scenario. 3 turbines are aligned in a staggered pattern to capture a prevailing north wind. Midday, the wind shifts 20 degrees to the west. How should each turbine's blade, pitch, and yaw orientation be adjusted to maximize total output while minimizing wake interference? Emily picked up her cardboard and pencil. She didn't look at the man's face, only at the problem in her mind. She began with 3 circles for the turbines, offset in the stagger. Then she drew the wind's new path, a diagonal arrow cutting across the page. She shaded the wake turbulence behind each turbine, the way she always did, dark at the center, lighter at the edges. First turbine stays mostly the same, she said, her voice steady. But you tilt the yaw 4 degrees into the west component, so the blades catch both parts of the wind. Blade pitch stays shallow to keep speed up. She moved to the second turbine. Here, the wake is shifted. You angle the yaw 6 degrees west to slide into the gap, but pitch the blades a little steeper, just enough to take advantage of the higher pressure zone. On the third turbine, she paused. This one gets the leftovers, but the leftovers are faster because they've been squeezed between the wakes. So you yaw only 2 degrees west and pitch back to shallow to keep the rotation smooth. For a long moment, no one spoke. Finally, a woman with sharp glasses leaned forward. Why those specific yaw angles? Emily turned her cardboard toward the camera. Because if you do more, the blades bite too hard into the wind and stall. Less, and you miss the side push. You can see it here. She traced a faint pencil arc where the wind would slip past if the angle was wrong. Another voice broke in. Those numbers, did Dr. Harper give them to you? Emily blinked. No, I just know how the wind feels when it changes direction like that. 4 degrees is about the width of my thumb at arm's length. 6 degrees is a thumb and a half. Some of the faces looked amused. Others, less so. When the session ended, Harper messaged her privately. You did perfectly. But it might take time for them to admit it. Emily set down her pencil. So, they still don't believe me? Harper hesitated. Some do, some don't. But at least now they've seen you work. The next morning, a letter arrived in the Carter mailbox. It was from the MIT Renewable Energy Research Group. Inside was a single sheet. Invitation to visit MIT Laboratory, Cambridge, MA. Pending funding approval, we invite Emily Carter to participate in a week-long collaboration at our facility to further test her turbine blade pitch configuration under varied environmental simulations. Jack read it twice, then looked at Emily. That's a long way from the panhandle. Emily traced the edge of the paper with her finger. Do you think we can go? Jack sighed. If they cover it, maybe. But she could tell from the set of his jaw that money wasn't the only obstacle. The ranch needed both of them every day. A week gone was a week of fences not mended, cattle not checked, barley not watered. That night, Emily sat by her bedroom window, watching the silhouettes of the far-off wind turbines turning against the starlit sky. She thought about the board's faces, how some had leaned closer when she spoke, while others leaned back, arms crossed. The wind, at least, didn't doubt her. It moved across the fields with the same restless certainty it always had, whispering to her in a language she was only beginning to translate. She would go to Cambridge if she could. If not, the wind would still be here, and so would she. The video call had been one thing. This was something else entirely. Emily had never been inside a university before, much less a place like the MIT field station in Amarillo. The building was new, its glass walls reflecting the wide Texas sky. Inside, It smelled faintly of ozone from soldering irons and the dusty tang of unrolled extension cords. Dr. Harper met her in the lobby with a quick, reassuring smile. "It'll just be a few of us," she said. "No cameras, no recordings. They want to see your mind at work without distractions." "What kind of problem are they going to give me?" Emily asked. Harper hesitated. "Something real. Something they've been stuck on for a while. I told them you work best with pencil and paper." Emily touched the folded mineral feed box in her pocket, the cardboard already bearing faint smudges from her thumb. They led her to a long room with a single table in the middle. On one side sat 4 people, 3 men, 1 woman, none smiling. A whiteboard covered one wall and a portable fan hummed in the corner, the only sound. "Emily Carter," said the woman, whose gray suit looked as crisp as starched paper. "We appreciate you making the time. Please sit." Emily sat, her legs swinging slightly because the chair was high. "We're going to present you with a simplified version of one of our current challenges," the woman continued. "You may use any drawing materials you wish, but no calculators or internet access. We'll observe, but not assist." One of the men slid a single sheet across the table. On it was a diagram of a hilly landscape, 3 wind turbines perched along a ridge. Wind arrows swept across the page from the northwest, then bent slightly as they crossed the uneven terrain. Numbers showed wind speed at different points: 13 m/s at the ridge crest, 10 m/s in the small valley, 15 m/s on the southern slope. Question: determine each turbine's optimal yaw orientation and blade pitch to maximize combined energy output over a 6-hour wind cycle, accounting for terrain-induced turbulence. Emily traced the ridgeline on the page with her finger. She knew this wasn't just about wind direction. It was about how the hills squeezed and bent the flow, making it faster in some spots and sluggish in others. She took out her cardboard, smoothed it flat, and began to sketch the ridge from above. Then, without looking at the panel, she asked, "What time of day is the 6-hour cycle starting?" The man on the left raised an eyebrow. "Why does that matter?" "Because the wind here changes with the sun," Emily said. "Heat on the south slope in the afternoon makes the air climb faster. If we're starting in the morning, the speeds won't be the same." The woman in the gray suit nodded curtly. "Start at 10 a.m., Emily began with Turbine 1 on the ridge crest. "Yaw 2 degrees east of the northwest wind to catch the acceleration coming up the slope. Pitch shallow. Too much bite and it'll stall in the turbulence." For Turbine 2 in the valley, she frowned. "This one's tricky. The wind slows here, so the yaw stays almost straight into it, but you steepen the pitch to make use of the higher pressure zone caused by the hill's leeward side." She drew small arrows showing the eddies she imagined curling behind the ridge. Turbine 3, on the southern slope, made her pause. "Here's where the heat comes in. By midday, the slope will start generating its own updraft. So I'd yaw 5 degrees west of the incoming wind to blend that updraft with the main flow and pitch medium, not too steep, or you'll fight the updraft instead of riding it." The panel watched her draw the wakes, tapered, swirling trails behind each rotor, and then connect them, showing how the turbulence from one might slip into the next. She adjusted Turbine 2's yaw by a single degree after realizing Turbine 1's wake would clip its outer blade. When she finished, she set down her pencil. "That's what I'd try first. Then I'd watch the flags for an hour to see if the wind's telling me something different." Silence stretched in the room. The man on the left leaned forward. "You adjusted Turbine 2's yaw after finishing the wakes. Why?" "Because I realized I'd put it too far into Turbine 1's leftover wind," Emily said. "If you try to grab all the speed you can, you forget the wind's tired after the first rotor. You've got to give it a little rest before it hits the next one." One of the other men actually smiled at that. "Wind's tired. I like that." The woman in the gray suit tapped the paper. You've essentially described a modified wake steering model without calling it that. Are you aware this is an active area of research? Emily shook her head. I'm just aware of the wind. When the meeting ended, they didn't tell her whether she had passed whatever test this was. But Harper met her outside the door, her eyes brighter than when they'd walked in. They're not saying it out loud yet, but I think you just convinced the last holdouts. Emily didn't feel triumphant. She felt tired. Drawing for strangers who doubted you wasn't like sketching in the barn. Here the air felt heavier, like she'd been carrying the weight of their suspicion the whole time. That night, back home, she lay awake in her small bedroom. The cardboard with her ridge drawing was propped against the wall, the pencil lines still sharp in the moonlight. She thought of the turbines, real or imagined, turning in the dark, blades catching and releasing the invisible river that had been there long before any of them. The wind never closed its doors to her. The storm came in without warning. All afternoon the sky had been a perfect blue, the kind that makes the land look endless. The air was dry, the wind steady, the barley whispering in the fields. But just after sunset, a dark line appeared on the northwest horizon, so faint at first that Emily thought it was a trick of the light. Within half an hour, it had grown into a wall. The first wind hit in a sharp gust, carrying with it the smell of rain on hot dust. By the time the weather radio in the kitchen crackled its warning, the horizon was alive with flickers of lightning. Emily was in the barn, checking the latch on the goat pen, when she heard the low, rolling hum from the Dobbs property, a sound she knew too well. The old windmill was straining against the sudden wind, metal on metal. But it wasn't just Dobbs' windmill. Across the panhandle, the big turbines had started to howl. She could hear them in the distance, deep, resonant moans as the blades met gusts they hadn't been built to love. And then she saw it. The MIT test turbine. It stood in the Carter pasture, a smaller cousin to the Giants, built to prove her 18% design in real-world weather. In the flickering light, its blades turned smooth and sure, not jerking or shuddering like the others. By the time Harper's truck pulled up, the wind had doubled in strength. Rain was coming sideways now, fine as sand, stinging Emily's cheeks. Harper jumped out, pulling her hood tight. "We've got to secure the instruments!" she shouted over the roar. Singh was right behind her, cradling the portable data logger like a baby. "We're getting readings we've never seen, gusts up to 60 miles an hour." Emily pointed to the turbine. "It's still running clean." Harper turned to look. Even in the violent gusts, the blades moved in a measured rhythm, catching just enough wind to keep spinning without tearing themselves apart. The yaw motor had shifted the rotor slightly, letting the worst gusts slide past instead of slamming head-on. "That angle's saving it," Harper said. "Your angle." Lightning flashed, turning the pasture white for an instant. Emily saw the silhouette of a nearby utility-scale turbine, one of the big ones, and her stomach clenched. One blade was pitching too steep into the wind. The next gust slammed it like a giant's hand. With a sound like a tree snapping, the blade bent and twisted, sending fragments spinning into the night. The MIT test turbine kept turning. By midnight, the storm's heart was over them. The wind screamed around the corners of the barn, shaking the walls. Water hammered the roof. Emily stood just inside the open barn door, cardboard notebook clutched to her chest, eyes fixed on the small turbine. Harper came to stand beside her. "You can go inside, Emily. I want to see it through." They watched together as another burst of lightning lit the field. The turbine was still standing, its blades shifting just enough between gusts to keep balance. Singh's voice called from the data logger, "Output holding steady, only minor dips in the biggest gusts." Emily allowed herself the smallest smile. "It's dancing," she thought, "even in this." The storm began to fade just before dawn, leaving behind a sky the color of pewter. The air was heavy and wet, the fields pocked with shallow puddles. The big turbines in the distance were still, several damaged, one with its rotor frozen in a broken salute to the sky. Dobbs' old windmill hung at an awkward angle, tail fin twisted. But in the Carter pasture, the test turbine turned slowly in the soft morning wind, unbroken. By mid-morning, a local reporter had shown up, camera in hand. Harper tried to wave him off, but he'd already seen the contrast. Destroyed machines all over the county, and here, a small turbine that had not only survived, but kept producing power. Emily stood awkwardly as the man took her picture, her hair still damp from the rain, boots caked in mud, cardboard notebook under her arm. "Name?" the reporter asked. "Emily Carter." "Age?" 12. He glanced at the turbine. "Did you build that?" "No," Emily said, looking at Harper. "I just told it where to turn." By the next day, the photo was everywhere. Front page of the Amarillo Globe News, then online, spreading far beyond Texas. The caption read, "Panhandle Girl's design helps turbine withstand historic storm." Some people praised her. Others claimed it was luck. A few accused the MIT team of staging it for publicity. Emily didn't care much. She'd been there. She'd heard the difference between fighting the wind and dancing with it, and she knew which one had survived. 2 mornings after the storm, a black SUV rolled up the dusty road to the Carter Ranch. Emily was on the porch, mending a lead rope with twine, when it stopped in front of the house. The doors opened, and 2 men in crisp suits stepped out, one tall and broad, the other shorter, with a briefcase polished to a mirror shine. They looked like they'd been dropped straight out of a Dallas office tower into the panhandle dust. "Emily Carter?" the taller one asked, smiling like they were already friends. "Yes, sir." "I'm Tom Garrison. This is Mr. LeBlanc. We represent Lone Star Wind Technologies." Emily's father came out, wiping his hands on a rag. His eyes narrowed a little. "We're not in the market for turbines." Garrison's smile didn't fade. "We're here about something else entirely, your daughter's design." Inside, at the kitchen table, they laid out glossy folders and a stack of legal papers. LeBlanc spoke in a smooth, careful voice. "Your configuration, the blade pitch and yaw strategy that kept the MIT turbine running during the storm, has enormous commercial potential. We'd like to acquire exclusive rights to it." "Exclusive rights?" Emily asked. "That means," LeBlanc said, "we would own the design. We'd handle manufacturing, marketing, and licensing. You and your family would receive a one-time payment of $500,000. The number seemed to hang in the air. Jack Carter leaned back in his chair. "That's a lot of money." "It's more than most people in this county make in 10 years, Garrison said. "You could pay off your debts, upgrade your equipment, put Emily through college anywhere she wants to go." Emily looked at the papers. The words blurred into each other. Exclusive license, perpetual ownership, non-disclosure. "If we sign," she said slowly, "does that mean no one else can use it unless they pay you?" "That's correct," LeBlanc said. "But that's how innovation gets to market. We can make sure your design is protected and monetized." Harper wasn't there, but Emily could almost hear her voice. "Think about the long term." Emily thought about the test turbine still turning outside and the storm-damaged machines scattered across the county. She thought about the way her design had worked not because it fought the wind, but because it respected it. "Would you change it?" she asked suddenly. LeBlanc tilted his head. "Change it?" "The design. Would you make it so it works best for making more money, even if it's not the best for the land or the people living near it?" Garrison's smile flickered. Optimize it for production efficiency, yes. That's standard practice. After they left, the kitchen was quiet for a long time. The check they'd waived, just a sample to show good faith, still sat on the table. Emily's mother picked it up, turned it over, and set it down again. $500,000, she murmured. We could pay everything off, fix the barn roof, get a new truck, maybe even take a trip somewhere. Jack was staring out the window at the barley fields. Yeah, but we'd be selling it. Not just the design, selling control over it. Once it's theirs, they can do whatever they want. Emily's voice was small. Even if that's not what I meant it for. That night, Emily sat on the porch steps with her cardboard in her lap. She sketched absent-mindedly, not turbines this time, but a simple arc, like a bird's wing in flight. She thought about what Harper had told her, that ideas are like seeds. You can plant them in your own soil or hand them to someone else and hope they don't grow thorns. She imagined her design locked away in some Lone Star filing cabinet, used only for turbines that paid them back 10 times over. She imagined the farms and small towns that might never see it. The next morning, when Garrison and LeBlanc came back expecting an answer, Emily was ready. I appreciate your offer, she said, her voice steady. But I'm not selling it to just one company. I'm sharing it. LeBlanc's eyebrows lifted. Sharing? Yes, openly. Anyone can use it. Farmers, towns, other researchers. No one has to ask permission. That's unwise, Garrison said, his smile gone now. You're giving away your leverage. It's not leverage, Emily said quietly. It's the wind. It doesn't belong to me. They left without shaking hands. The sample check stayed on the table for a day. Then Emily's father burned it in the barrel behind the barn. By the end of the week, Harper had posted the design specifications online with Emily's name at the top. No patent, no exclusivity. Just an open document, free for anyone to download. The first message came from a research group in Denmark. The second, from a farmer in Oklahoma who had lost 2 turbines in the storm. By the end of the month, there were dozens more. Emily went back to mending fences, hauling water, and sketching on cardboard. But now, when she looked out at the distant wind farm, she knew that somewhere, maybe far away, turbines were turning a little smoother, a little stronger, because she had told them where to turn. 2 weeks after Harper posted Emily's design online, the first article appeared in a major newspaper. It was in the Dallas Morning News, a full-page feature titled, Panhandle Girl's Turbine Design Goes Global. There was a picture of Emily standing in the barley field, hair pulled back, cardboard notebook in hand. Behind her, the test turbine turned in the soft morning wind. The article told the story of the storm, of the 18% gain, and of her decision to make the design public instead of selling it. By the end of the week, the story had been picked up by the Associated Press. Suddenly, her name was appearing in places she'd never imagined. The New York Times, BBC World Service, even a science podcast from Australia. One afternoon, Harper called from Cambridge. You're going to get an invitation, she said. To what? The International Conference on Renewable Energy in San Francisco. They want you to speak. Emily nearly dropped the phone. Speak? Like, stand on a stage? Yes, Harper said, laughing softly. You'll have 5 minutes. Just tell them what you told me the first time we met, about dancing with the wind instead of fighting it. Emily wasn't sure if she was more terrified or excited. The invitation arrived 3 days later, thick paper, embossed letters. Her father read it aloud at the kitchen table while her mother folded laundry. You'll be the youngest person there by probably decades, he said, looking over the top of the page. Emily shifted in her chair. What if they ask me questions I don't know the answer to? Then you tell them what you do know, her mother said simply. That's enough. The conference hall was bigger than any barn Emily had ever seen and filled with hundreds of people in suits and dresses. There were booths showing holograms of offshore wind farms, VR headsets for exploring new turbine models, and coffee stands serving cappuccinos so smooth they didn't even taste like coffee. Harper guided her backstage, past screens showing live feeds from the main stage. "You don't need to impress them with math," Harper said quietly. "Impress them with truth." When her turn came, Emily stepped onto the stage clutching her cardboard. The lights were blinding. She could barely make out the faces in the crowd. She set the cardboard on the podium. "I'm not an engineer," she began. "I live on a ranch in the Texas Panhandle. My parents raise cattle and barley. The wind has been my neighbor for as long as I can remember." She told them about watching the windmills and turbines, about noticing when they moved with the wind and when they fought it. She described the storm and how the turbine with her angle had stayed steady when others failed. "I didn't invent the wind," she said, her voice steady now. "I just listened to it. And I wanted anyone who wanted to listen to have the chance to use what I'd found." She didn't talk long, less than her 5 minutes, but when she finished, the hall was silent for a beat, then filled with applause that felt like a wave rolling toward her. Afterward, people from all over the world came to speak to her. A man from Kenya told her about small turbines in rural villages that could now work better in changing winds. A woman from Norway said her team was testing the design on floating offshore platforms. One older engineer, hair white as cotton, shook her hand and said, "You've reminded me why I started doing this work." A month later, Emily's name appeared on the cover of Wind Energy Today as the youngest contributor to global turbine innovation. The magazine printed diagrams of her pitch and yaw configuration, annotated in proper engineering terms, but still, in the corner, there was her original sketch on feedbox cardboard. One afternoon, a letter came from the University of Texas. It wasn't an acceptance letter. She was still far too young. But it was an offer, a full scholarship waiting for her, no matter when she applied, for any program she chose. Jack Carter held the letter for a long time before handing it to her. "That's the kind of thing money can't buy," he said. Emily just smiled. She'd never once thought about college before all this, but now she could see herself there, learning the names for things she already felt in her bones. Back in the Panhandle, life didn't change overnight. There were still fences to mend, calves to feed, and mornings when the dust blew so hard you couldn't see a quarter-mile ahead. But on certain days, when the light was right, Emily could stand at the edge of the pasture and see the distant wind farm, its turbines turning in the steady rhythm she'd learned to trust. And she knew that somewhere, far beyond what she could see, the same rhythm was repeating, because she had chosen to share it. A year passed. The Panhandle seasons rolled through their familiar colors, wheat gold to winter brown, spring green to the pale silver of summer dust. Life on the Carter Ranch stayed mostly the same: cattle to check, barley to tend, fences to fix. But the wind carried new stories now. It came in letters and emails from places Emily had only read about. In Denmark, a coastal turbine farm had weathered its first autumn storms without a single blade damaged. In Kenya, a small village powered its clinic entirely from a set of hand-built turbines that spun more easily in changing breezes. In Norway, offshore platforms reported smoother operation in high seas. Even in Amarillo, farmers who could never afford the newest commercial models were building their own smaller versions using Emily's open design, cut from salvaged parts, mounted on towers that had once held TV antennas. One afternoon, Emily was in the barn loft sorting baling twine when her father called up. "You've got visitors!" She climbed down to find 2 men and a woman standing by the truck. The woman introduced herself as a teacher from a small town west of Lubbock. "We've been following your work," she said. Our high school started a wind energy club. The kids have been building your design. They'd like to meet you. Emily's instinct was to shy away. Public speaking still wasn't her favorite thing, but something in the woman's voice made her nod. "I can come," she said. The next week, she found herself in a classroom filled with posters of wind farms and solar panels. On the tables were small turbines made of wood, PVC, and bicycle parts. A boy no older than she had been when the MIT van first stopped in the Panhandle proudly showed her how his team had adjusted the yaw using a repurposed weather vane. "It's not perfect," he admitted, "but it catches more wind than before." Emily smiled. "That's exactly how I started, making it better one little turn at a time." In the spring, a package arrived from Harper. Inside was a book, its cover showing a wind turbine silhouetted against a blazing sunset. On the title page was a note in Harper's neat handwriting, "For Emily, who taught us all to listen first." That summer, she got another letter, this one from the University of Texas, reminding her that the scholarship was still waiting. She kept it in the same drawer as her earliest cardboard sketches. She still didn't know if she'd leave the Panhandle when the time came. The ranch was in her bones. But she knew now that the world was bigger than the horizon she'd grown up with, and that she could step into it whenever she was ready. One evening, as the sun dipped low and turned the barley to liquid gold, Emily sat on the porch steps, cardboard on her lap. She was sketching a new idea, nothing to do with turbines this time, just a shape she'd seen in the flight of a hawk that afternoon. Her father came out, coffee mug in hand. "What's that one for?" "I don't know yet," Emily said. "Just listening." "To what?" She looked up at the wind curling through the grass. "It'll tell me when it's ready." In the distance, the wind farm turned in steady unison, blades angling almost imperceptibly as the breeze shifted. Somewhere out there, on towers in other states and countries, the same adjustment was happening. Not because of a patent, not because of a contract, because once, a girl in the Texas Panhandle had decided the wind belonged to everyone. Long after the light had gone, she was still on the steps, listening. The wind had a way of carrying things far beyond what you could see, and though it would always return home, it never truly belonged to the Panhandle alone. "You don't fight the wind," she murmured to herself, closing her sketchbook. "You listen, and it tells you where to turn." This story began, like so many good things, with something small, something others might have thrown away. For Emily, it was a piece of feedbox cardboard. For me, it was a memory of a wide sky, of wind that never rests, and of the quiet brilliance that can live in the most unassuming places. I owe my deepest thanks to the real ranchers, farmers, and small-town families of the Texas Panhandle, who live every day with both the hardships and the beauty of a land shaped by wind. To the teachers, engineers, and scientists, thank you for reminding me that knowledge doesn't belong only to those with the right degrees or the right addresses. It belongs to anyone willing to watch, to listen, and to try again. To you, who stayed with me until the last moment of this story, thank you for giving Emily's journey your time, your ears, and your heart. I hope these chapters have felt like sitting beside a warm stove in winter, hearing a story that reminds you of the good in people. And finally, to every quiet child somewhere, sketching shapes no one else understands yet, keep drawing. The wind has been here a long time, but it still needs new listeners.